What did your parents do that kind of you up even though it wasn't really that bad? I never got a hug from either of my parents. Until my dog died last month. Growing up without hugs didn't seem too strange to me. But getting a hug from both of them the day he died has kind of made me look back on a lot of things and think about it. Mom would joke that we would have to shop in the pretty plus section for me as I was a little chubby. That year I lost a ton of weight from eating less, not starving myself. Then she told me she was worried I was too skinny and if I lost more weight would take me to a psychologist. I was like, get it together, mom. My mum's relationship with food and weight had an impact on me during my teenage years, early 20s. I didn't know how to reward myself without food. And conversely, I didn't know how to comfort myself without food. This led to being overweight and being in that cycle of eating food because I was unhappy. And being unhappy because I was overweight. But she made me an excellent cook and make people jealous when I throw dinner parties. So every cloud. They teased me really badly when I showed the slightest interest in a girl or even took a step towards one. It contributed to anxiety issues and caused me to have major issues expressing myself. You might think it is no big deal or a joke. But don't tease your kids about that. That classic complaint I always see on Reddit. Praise me for being smart instead of working hard. Leaving me unable to actually work when I couldn't coast by on my quick reading comprehension skills. Not let me hang out at a friend's house if they hadn't A, met the parents or B, parents weren't home. It makes sense. But when your mom never went to go meet parents, it means you don't get to go play GoldenEye and have social interaction outside of school. Looking back on it, I went to a small Catholic school. How did she not meet these parents ever? I think she just didn't want me to be a well-adjusted lad. I have never once heard my mom say that she was proud of me or, other than the few times she apologized for something, that she loved me. It really doesn't sound like much. But boy am I up. I never accepted less than being the top of the class at everything. I now have a fear of failure that drives me to overwork. My dad refuses to admit when he is in pain. And he will wait to go to the doctor dentist until the pain is so bad that he can't think anymore. Because of this, there were times where the whole house was on edge for days because he was in a lot of pain and snapped at everything that annoyed him. It really me up for future relationships. It took a long time to find a girlfriend who understood why I would immediately shut down and sometimes start crying anytime someone, especially someone bigger than me, which isn't too hard to do because I'm only 5'6", started yelling. Even if that yelling wasn't directed at me. More than one of my previous exes tried to use that against me too. Expecting me to always be the okay one because my brother had so many issues. There were times when I was really struggling but felt like I had to keep it together because my parents were too preoccupied with my brother. My mom had undiagnosed anxiety disorder when I was growing up. I learned to be afraid of social situations because I'd pick up on my mom's emotions when we went out. He'd get really tense and I always felt like we were rushing everywhere. The word relax wasn't a part of growing up for me. Everything was a worry-inducing mess. Ages 6-13 I wouldn't sleep because I was so worried about everything. It's really not her fault. My grandpa was, still is, an abusive. She's on medication now that I'm an adult and doing much better. I'm still in the process of unlearning her habits. I feel like it will take my lifetime to do it. Never let me do any sports because they were afraid I'd get injured. I wish they had let me try something so my potato self wouldn't have so much trouble now. It's upsetting to see 7-year-olds better at tennis than me. Tried to police my eating habits. But to the point that I was getting in trouble for eating certain types of apples because they were too sweet or bananas because they were the Mars bar of fruit, her exact words. Having to listen to your siblings being praised for being gifted and talented while they pretty much did the opposite with me. They spend their time raising me focusing on trying to get me into religion. Instead of focusing on having a good relationship with me or instead of teaching me how to develop good relationships with people. Kept bigging up how intelligent I was growing up. I left me sort of assuming that I can do everything easily. Which is why I upped my final grades and was not good enough to get to university. And then it me up further when my hard-working twin sister got a place at Oxford University. Which meant they kept saying things like, "Oh, but you could have done that. We're always smarter than her." Maybe I was doesn't mean I cared about education. I'm the youngest and therefore expected to make up for the failures my siblings made. I remembered when I got my GCSE results. My mum didn't even turn up. And I called her to tell her I got a B in English. All she said was, "You could have tried harder." And nothing else. The rest of the afternoon I cried in the arms of my best friend's mother. And ever since then, I feel like I failure in no matter what I do. Doesn't help that I have several mental health problems. I had a pretty sheltered life since my parents were incredibly overprotective. I know they had good thoughts. Now I'm working through social anxiety, confidence, and identity issues. Hide her negative emotions and fears. I mean, it came from a very good place. Don't scare the kids. Don't let's see them you're unhappy. And all that jazz. But I thought for the longest time that feeling negative emotions or being scared of something made me inadequate and immature. Or that I was overreacting to event. Cause grown-ups don't feel those feelings. Right? My mom insists on guilt trips and emotional martyrdom. My dad is emotionless. My parents are wonderful and they did their best. I wish they knew more that confidence can be taught. And made an effort to instill it in me instead of letting me just be a shy little timid girl. I probably wouldn't be so socially anxious if they just pushed me a bit when I was younger and more easily able to adapt and change. This got more attention than I thought. Just to clarify, I am introverted and no amount of pushing will change that, and too much pushing is not good. Damaging even. But if I had encouragement to be more confident, okay with myself, able to try new things and not worry about failure or be embarrassed or uncomfortable with myself, and maybe I'd be a confident introvert, able to step up to the plate when I need to. I jumped in the shower straight after my mum. Dad came in the bathroom to pee. That wasn't the bad bit. He's done that my entire life. He turns to the shower, thinking it was my mum, and purrs in his sexy voice, "Can I join you?" Just about died from shock. Screamed when I saw his hand next to the curtain. My mum conditioned me to think everyone is out to screw me over. Pro tip: if you act this way, people will. Eventually. My parents, my dad in particular, used to tease me relentlessly about having hiccups. When I asked him to stop, he made some big production about not joking with me about anything, ever. I finally got tired of the silent treatment and let him continue making fun of me. To this day, I try, to the best of my ability, to never have the hiccups around people. If I do, I will immediately leave and deal with them and hope against hope no one heard me. They had an unhealthy relationship, and were hardly ever affectionate, or even nice to each other. They sent me to several psychologists and psychiatrists because I was very socially withdrawn as a child. I didn't get accepted by my peers. So that was my defense. As if that wasn't bad enough, I couldn't even get a break at home. I constantly got hounded by my parents for not being able to make friends. When I was 5, I did something bad that I don't remember, and my mom took all my stuffed animals and we drove to the poor boxes in a plaza by my house and watched as she put bags and bags of my most beloved stuffed animals into the poor boxes. I eventually got more stuffed animals, but I developed such an anxious emotional attachment to them that I can't go into stores and look stuffed animals in the eyes, or else I will have to buy them. I also get anxious when I see stuffed animals being thrown away or dirty and damaged due to neglect. It's really dumb, but it's how I am. Pranks. Not so much to me but the middle child. My dad would do some pretty messed up. Here are a few that I remember really well. My brother was probably 5 or 6, so one day my dad went and cut a hole in a matchbox, stuffed it with cotton, then put his finger through the bottom and put fake blood on it. He then walked up to my brother and scared the out of him with it. When bro was really young, probably 4-5, my dad went into his room before bed and hid under his bed. After my brother got nicer comfy, he starts scratching the floor, then lifting the bed off the ground. The worst one was when my brother was probably 10 or 11. He walked into my dad's shop and my dad threw a lit firecracker at him at the same time that he drew a pistol up and pointed it at him. He is still pretty messed up to this day. Kicked me out on my 18th birthday. It was a school night and I had nowhere to go and 50 cents in my pocket. Me re-eyed up. Dad was an extremely large, loud man who sometimes let his emotions get the best of him. Love the guy. But now I kinda have a problem with not looking people in the eyes. I ghost people when I'm walking around in public alone. In HS and college, whenever a friend would see me walking, they would physically have to stop me or I wouldn't even notice they were there. Just eyes straight and walk forward. I loathe confrontation to the point where I will accept a shitty unfair situation just to not have the possibility of a confrontation. Full stop. They never really rewarded us for anything. But any level of bad behavior was met with over-the-top discipline. Never physical, but always grounded. No phone. No seeing friends. No electronics. For every little thing, plus endless speeches about what was wrong with us. By the time I became a teenager, I just did whatever I felt like doing because I'd get the same punishment regardless of the severity of my actions. And there was no positive reinforcement if I did something well or right. I have struggled with my weight my whole life, whereas my brothers haven't. My dad likes to rough them up with playful insults and tried it on me one day. He made a comment about my tuck shop lady arms and I have never worn a sleeveless top since. They rarely hugged us. And when we were mean to each other, punished us by making us hug each other. As a result, the only person I feel comfortable hugging is my boyfriend. When someone else tries to hug me, I stiffen up and get really uncomfortable. It doesn't seem like much, but seeing my friends always hugging their parents as I got older made me really wish I grew up like that. My parents are wonderful people who gave me nothing but support and reassurance. I am grateful to have had them. That said, I have absolutely no ability to express my interests or hobbies to anybody because they refuse to accept that their son enjoys video games and other childish crap over more traditional hobbies. I've always assumed it's because they both work extremely hard and therefore never had the time or energy to ingratiate themselves with some things easily, and often rightfully deemed as wastes of time. The result is that I have a smoldering friendly relationship with them at best and only began to hunt down friend groups recently because of the stigma they bestowed on me. My biggest regret thus far is that I didn't find my local Smash Bros scene or Magic LGS and the best friends that I found with them earlier because I knew my parents would either berate or make fun of me for enjoying it. Whenever I was upset about something or whatever and my mom would ask what was wrong, I would tell her and she would usually respond with something along the lines of, well, that's no big deal. Just get over it. Led to some depression and anxiety issues and the complete inability to express to someone when something was bothering me in any sort of constructive way, which obviously leads to problems in relationships. So don't brush off, belittle or whatever your child's feelings. My dad purposefully overfed me and consistently took me out to fast food so I'd grow up overweight and therefore boys wouldn't like me. He passed away 12 years ago, so I can't ask him if it was to protect me from rapers. He was incredibly worried about me being kidnapped and raped, or because he had an unhealthy attachment to me, like, never did anything sexual. But he definitely crossed the lines of healthy parenting. I'm overweight now and it's much harder for me to maintain a healthy weight because you develop all of your fat cells in youth. And his actions directly contributed to my overabundance. But I'm working on either losing weight or loving myself more. My parents abandoned me for 2 years when I was 16. Dad was mentally ill and mom could not handle it, so she took my brothers and split. Dad couldn't handle that, so he ended up in a mental institution. We got out, they reconciled, and moved back in together with my brothers, leaving me in the wind. Until I graduated high school and left for university. That was 12 years ago and they have never once apologized or even brought it up. The fact that they either don't realize or simply don't care how bad it me up makes it so much worse. My mom always told me how pretty I would be if I lost 10 pounds. My parents were bad with money. Dealt with repossessions and utilities shut off all my life. Made plenty of money. They just sucked at managing wisely. I now have a problem with bills and related serious things. I'm a 40-year-old, educated, large man, and I cower like a child for 2 hours pacing when I need to make a damn 5 minutes phone call to pay the power bill. I was constantly compared to my fellow female classmates by my mother, who wanted a daughter that liked to do her hair and makeup. I was an athlete. Also, after my parents' divorce, they were both remarried within a few years. Having to go 4 different places for Christmas sucks. I don't care how many presents. I don't know how to have a real relationship. My parents combined have over 6 divorces. They did virtually everything for me. When I became an adult, I had no real world experience how to fix something or build something, cook something, etc. I don't know if they ever felt it to the degree I did, or if I was just being oversensitive and high-strung. But they allowed stressful situations to escalate. Looking back, it was an unfortunate culmination of several things. I was going through the hormonal part of puberty while doing my GCSEs, and on the back of those, my A levels, which are their own story. My mum was dealing with a legal issue over some property in Romania. Her greatly beloved aunt dying. The menopause. Her way of dealing with things that stress her is to talk about it at you. Repeatedly, everything has to come back to this issue. The way I tend to deal with it is block it out. Put on music and dance like a maniac. Or get totally absorbed by a let's play or fanfiction. It's just, we clashed over it so much. If she caught me doing anything except studying, she'd scream at me. And I'd scream back and decide not to do any work out of spite. She threatened to lock me in my room and bring food so I'd have no excuse to stop revising. Apparently, like she did, I'd refuse to touch my school books and avoid spending time with her as much as possible. She'd see my light on at night and take that as permission to come in and lecture me about how I'm being a bad daughter and that it was my responsibility to get high grades because they were paying for my schooling and that I was expected to repay them at some point. How dare I use my energy for anything else? And how dare I behave like being around her was a chore? It's not like either of us were just acting under hormones and stress. She was the adult. It could have been mediated. And whenever we talk now, I'm automatically gearing up to be shouted at and criticized. I find, sometimes, that I try and start a fight because I'm expecting one and I want to get it over with. I have to fight not to act like I dislike being around my mother, and I like her. Truly. And love her. She's actually alright to be around. It's such a pity that I was so shocked by that. This will probably be pushed to the bottom, but it was good to get it out somewhere. I don't really know if I'm that up, but I've never been able to emotionally bond with them too well. It's always been kind of meh. I'm the youngest of 4 kids, being the only son with 3 older sisters. Around the time I entered high school, we were at the apex of family problems, with my dad being a raging alcoholic, and my mom constantly taking care of all the stupid my 3 older sisters were getting up to. I had 100% free reign to do almost whatever I want. As long as it didn't cause my mom any effort, I could stay out for as long as I wanted, without saying where I was going since I was 13. My dad was basically unavailable as a parent my whole life. Even though he and my mom never divorced and to this day are still together. I was never questioned about schoolwork. My report card was never important and barely glanced over. Never had to do a thing in the house. When I wasn't out doing God knows what with my friends, I would be in my room in front of my PC, refusing to take any part in any family activities. This was true up until the day I moved out when I was 20. The last 10 years has been rough, and I've had to slowly learn how to be an adult, and how to deal with problems. Too long, didn't read. My parents were there, but dad was far away in PTSD land with alcoholism. And mom was too busy managing my older sister's screw ups, so I was given way too much independence too early. My dad spoiled the out of my sisters and I. He's one of those parents that feel bad saying no. One of the biggest things to come out of this is that he will drive us everywhere. School, work, friends, anywhere. We've learned to rely on him for rides because of this. I'm 18 and I rode a city bus for the first time in March, and my aunt had to come with my sister, who is 21, and I to show us how it worked. The same sister is moved out and still asks my dad to drive her to work and home. My dad has finally started putting his foot down as it's becoming ridiculous and a big hassle. It's taking my sister especially a long time to get used to this though. Other thing is, while we didn't have a lot of money growing up, he'd buy us treats often and would almost never say no to giving us a couple bucks for lunch at school or to go out with our friends. This up my sisters more than me, why I don't know, but they're 21, 24, and 33 and all still ask to borrow money from him pretty often. Some gets paid back, some don't. They are all just absolutely terrible with money because they are used to having my dad to fall back on if they don't have enough for rent or a different bill. My dad has also put his foot down with this and said he can't lend out any more money as he can't afford it. My sister's reactions were very pathetic. I have a very tense relationship with my sisters because of this. I love them because they're family and we have great times together. They treat my dad so horribly sometimes and don't appreciate all that he's done for them. To any parents, future parents that might be reading this, don't overspoil your kids, especially as they get older. It will do more harm than good and they'll struggle in the real world without help. My dad used to always tell me it's not what you know, it's who you know. Trying to ingratiate myself with everyone totally backfired on me. No one ever wanted to be my friend because they think I'm a kiss who will report everything back to the boss or teacher. And management doesn't like me either because I look like a loner instead of a team player. Plus skimping on the books makes me sound dumb today. I have one of those clueless Gary Johnson style personalities where it seems like I'm hearing everything for the first time ever. My parents are extremely sarcastic. So much so that now whenever I get a compliment or praise I take it as someone mocking me. It really makes me feel like I have no true friends. Even though I know that's not the case. Tell me the truth and I won't scold, is that the right English word? You proceed to tell the truth and get scolded. I just got better at lying and half of the time now. When someone asks me a question, I lie out of habit. Even if the truth isn't harmful. Always being told I was a drama queen whenever I brought emotional and even physical, feeling sick etc. issues up. I now have a hard time explaining how I feel and emotions get very overwhelming. If something bad happens I am numb for a while and then the emotions all come at once when I'm alone. Luckily I have a few good friends that support me and it has made me eager to listen to other people's issues. Raise me Baptist. I used to have nightmares of a bloody Jesus sitting on my bed judging me. Shouting at publicly humiliating me when I was having panic attacks as a very young child. My mum would get so angry with me. I understand why she was frustrated. It was a frustrating situation, and make me go and apologize to people who looked after me during an attack. Like if I was at school for example and had a panic attack because she was very late picking me up and I was convinced she was dead or some, she'd then go and make me walk around the school apologizing to all the teachers afterwards. Make me scared of being scared lol. And also my family was very well off growing up. I think my mum in particular was so worried about us kids growing up spoiled etc. I had absolutely no idea we were considered well off until I was in my mid-teens. As a horribly anxious child, having my mum constantly tell us how skint we were and how we had no money, which just wasn't true, made me petrified that we were going to end up homeless etc. I remember panicking every time we went shopping thinking that this was going to be the shop that would push us over the edge and we'd all end up on the street. Let me eat whatever I chose to. I grew up obese because I wanted junk and lots of it. My mum was a bad cook anyway. That didn't help much. It just made her life easier if I got to choose what I had for breakfast, lunch and dinner. I went years with the only vegetables I ate being peas and carrots. Thank God I changed, but I would rather have grown up healthy and not have to learn it all in my early 20s. My mom has only hit me once in my entire life when I was a kid. I must have really pushed her limits when she gave me a firm and very hard slap across the face. It hasn't me up or anything, it's just such a strong, detailed and vivid memory I have now, and I was only 4 years old at the time. She still feels horrible about it, but to be honest I probably was being a little lol. Whenever I would lose track of something, I'd get this huge lecture about how irresponsible I am. I am 21 now, and when I lose things, I tend to start shaking and hyperventilating and throwing things and shouting at nothing. It makes mornings hell for me. I hate myself. I hate myself so much for being irresponsible and useless so much sometimes that I want to die. My mom claims to not be scared of thunderstorms. Despite this, whenever there was one she would always be on high alert, especially when driving. And if the rain was marginally worse than normal or there was hail, she would tell me to watch out for tornadoes. I'm now terrified of thunderstorms. When I was a kid, I would throw up if it rained too hard. It's not so bad now, but I still get panicky and have been known to have anxiety attacks or vomit when I hear the emergency alert sound in the radio or TV. Tease me when I'm pooping for longer than a minute. When it's not teasing, it's asking me if I'm okay because I pooped for so long. Also, I have health issues, and anytime I bring one up, I get laughed at and told to either get over it or I'm just imagining it. Kids weren't going to get in the way of them living their life. My friends all have kids and I never see them as they have to go here, there and everywhere with after school clubs, parties and play dates. I knew I had to be home at 5:30 for dinner, otherwise I had to be out. I was very good at dancing but had to give it up as the times of the advanced classes was Saturday lunchtime and that wasn't convenient. I was a very good sprinter but athletics club was a Thursday evening and that clashed with something else. They never did anything to encourage us. I'm now fiercely independent and I have made the best of situations, but I know I could have done more had I got some backing. My dad worked a lot outside of dinner. I never really got to spend time with him, so I have this weird emotional connection with food. Traveled a lot, like 3 or more schools in a school year. It was for their work and we did get to go to many places, see all sorts of interesting things, and spent a lot of quality time as a family. But all that in and out of schools from 1st grade to 6th grade made me a person who doesn't make close friends. Why bother when you are going to be leaving in a few months anyway, or have no idea how long you may be in one place? When you are always going to be the new kid in class and often picked on for just being new, you just keep to yourself. So, I learned to be friendly, but standoffish and not let myself have too much attachment to people other than family. I'm a good casual friend and am good at making acquaintances. Just don't want to get too close. When I was in about 4th grade, my mom listened in on a phone conversation with one of my friends where we were talking, as much as a 4th grader can talk, about another friend of ours. She literally transcribed my entire side of the conversation onto a notepad, which I found maybe a couple days later lying around in the kitchen. I was so mortified, and as a parent now I cannot for the life of me figure out what she was thinking. She has always been a bit low-key crazy, but obviously something like that is such a betrayal of privacy and trust. Sure, eavesdrop all you want, but why write it down? I honestly had a really good childhood and fantastic parents. Really good people. But the one thing they drilled into me was respect for my elders and to not question authority. I'm 28 and every now and then I still have a hard time considering myself an adult because I still see people 10-15 years older than me as the real adults. They're automatically right about everything because of that. It took a long time before I realized that we're all just people, and no one actually knows what's going on and they can be wrong just like everyone else. Not caring about my academics. My 2 brothers did pretty poorly in school growing up, whereas I did decently well, at least enough to get into a top 40 university afterwards. They never knew how I was doing in school. But only that I wasn't failing any classes, unlike my brothers who constantly were sent home with letters from school detailing their near failing of classes. My mom would tell me much later that she didn't want to make my brothers feel inferior by celebrating any of my accomplishments. So they just ignored everything academic related altogether. Fortunately, I surrounded myself with friends who were all well-rounded, which encouraged me to succeed. As a fat kid, they insisted on weighing me every night. My parents always told me how perfect I am and how much they love me, while at the same time they flipped out if I did something wrong. I'm not 100% sure, but I think mainly this led to my mindset. Just do nothing at all. It works better than failing. Never stayed in one place for more than a couple of years. Not even the same country. This before I ever learned to even email my friends to stay in contact. To this day, I can't keep a friendship going long distance.